Welcome everybody, and thanks for having me here. Yeah, my name is Jan Fleury, and I must say I'm fascinated by CDPs. Maybe it's a bit weird, but yeah, that's a fact that I am. In the last 3 years, I wrote 12 articles about it, and in June I will be publishing a book about CDPs on Google Cloud that has about 60 pages. Yes, you can write so much about it, and even more. And that can only be if you're fascinated. So I'm working for Crystalloids. Been working for 5 years there already. I'm also chairman at Dutch Data-Driven Marketing Association. And half a year ago, I became a teacher in data privacy, governance, CDP, data strategy. So I'm a bit of a weirdo when it comes to data strategy and CDPs. But not only me. And how did that start my fascination? And that started when I was working, started to work for Crystalloids 5.5 years ago. Before I worked for Crystalloids, I had a view of complexity and cost, and oh my God, how this is so complex. But then within Crystalloids, I noticed it is not so complex. And especially when you work with Google Cloud products and you have an experienced service partner, then you can bring added value in about from zero to when you start, and after the first 6 weeks, you have really tangible results. And then I thought, well, I'm very intrigued by it. And next to that, of course, also the CDP world. There are about 100 CDP suppliers, depending on what your definition of a CDP is. That's a bit ambivalent. And that segment is growing significantly. But what we noticed within Crystalloids, at least, that in the last 2 years, the market share of these packaged CDPs isn't growing so far rapidly anymore, but Google is growing rapidly. And this is a market of multi-billion all over the world. And that has a reason. And that's why I'm standing in front of you here showing what is happening, and especially why and what it could mean to you. So first, I will dive into the differences between packaged and the headless, also called composable CDP. Then I will show you an example of a marketing technology ecosystem. And of course, that ecosystem should be part of the data strategy that George was talking about, and the first-party data strategy. And then, of course, the functions of a CDP, and then distinguishment between 3 types of CDPs, and the functionality comparison. And yes, the last question, what if my company already has a data lake or a data warehouse on a different cloud? Why would I use Google? And there are very specific reasons to do that. And I will cover that at the end of the presentation. Yeah, then Crystalloids. We are hyper-focused, and the only thing we do is architect, build, and maintain data platforms on Google Cloud. Can be customer data platforms of any type or enterprise data platforms, as we built for Rituals Cosmetics. And maybe we are not sure, we might be the only Google services partner in Europe that has this single focus, and that has many benefits, at least we believe so. And we have over a decade of experience in these implementations for all types of businesses, all types of verticals, and either can be very complex or very basic. And of course, also AI and BI to build that on top of the platform is part of that work. And because of this focus and over a decade of experience, we have almost 100 use cases, like user stories and epics that we have developed for several clients. And we now know what works in which situation and what doesn't work. I like also the question that you were having about B2B. We've also been there, and that's handy. And next to that, we also support real-time data platforms and customer data platforms with our contact services API, and that's proprietary code. And if you would work with us, you can get ownership of that code. You will fully own everything. And as a result of that, yeah, we have been identified as a leading partner of Google in Europe. But then, yes, a customer data platform, what's in the name? What is a packaged customer data platform? Who would give some definition of some ideas of what it should be? Maybe you had the question.
think it's hard one for me, but I feel like package label is probably like a package customer data platform is probably like a all-in-one solution for customer data platform that you can just buy as a package.
Yeah, very well, very well.
Cool.
Like that answer, and it's true. Yeah. And who dares to mention what is a headless or also called a composable CDP? And who has experience building that? It's a bit more tough, maybe. Yeah, yeah.
We have an answer online.
Yeah.
As services from a single provider. I think probably for that. From Ahmed.
Yeah, that's also a single provider. What we see in practice that some clients have two package CDPs or even three in one setup, because a package CDP can be an all-in-one solution, although all-in-one never works. But at least you can pretend you have an all-in-one. So what we see is that there are several types of customer data platforms in collecting and transforming, analytics, activation, orchestration. And you can also use a combination of these package CDPs and build that on top of Google Cloud Platform, for instance. And headless means that that the front end is being decoupled by the back end. And that term has gained traction in the CMS, the content management system world, where headless CMS is now the basic. How do you say it in English? That's now the default of development. And what we think at Crystalloids, that's also happening in the CDP world. So that's very interesting, if you ask me. And then some definitions. So what I liked in your answer is yes, all-in-one, or at least they claim it's all-in-one, or it's a combination of package CDPs that in total form like an all-in-one. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one provider. And that combination covers all the elements, the functions of a CDP that are mentioned in this definition. And a headless, also called composable CDP, is where you assemble, like compose the ingredients that you need to support your first-party data strategy. There's a question here. I'm not sure if I can read it. Maybe somebody can. That's now.
Setup. It's there.
Okay. It's gone. Yeah.
So I'll read it.
Yeah.
So the comment from Ahmed Hassan is a Frankenstein setup. Would that be a definition for composable?
Depends on what you mean by Frankenstein. Yeah, but I like the question and I understand the kind of metaphor. Frankenstein is very ugly, at least if you ask me. Yeah. So yeah, nice question. But it doesn't have to be a monster. If it had to be the association with Frankenstein, not at all. At least what we see with some high-end Google clients in the Netherlands, like Bol.com, Coolblue, Rituals, they all have like headless CDPs, and that's not Frankenstein-like.
Maybe best of breed is.
Yeah, best of breed. Yeah, and I will cover that later. Yeah, best of breed. Yeah, that you compose what you want to have in the platform. Thank you, Nico. Yeah, this is. There are many ways to look at a marketing technology like stack and the functions. It all starts with a customer, or it's not yet a customer. It's an anonymous visitor landing on your website. And you don't know yet, of course, who that is. And you can process their data when it comes to cookies, for instance, with an active consent, a yes or no. And there's also another reason to process a customer data, and that's legitimate interest. And there are, the GDPR says there's also one other reason, but I won't cover that today. And legitimate interest is that you don't need active consent, but as part of your services, you are allowed to process the data. An example is a customer doesn't give consent for cookies, but you need to process the data to send the goods to the customer. Even if they didn't give consent for cookies, and that's part of the business. You don't need active consent for that, because that's how that works. And then there are three like tiers in data. Who knows what zero-party data is, by the way? Yeah. I make that distinction sometimes. Zero-party data is data that a customer explicitly shares. That's name, address, date of birth, for instance, and or an interest. I'm interested in this type of products in clothing, and I'm not interested in accessories, as an example. That's zero-party data. First-party data is data that you derive from the customer behavior, like the website behavior, clicks in an email. But in total, we, as Georgia said, we call it first-party data. Then there's a trend coming up, and that's called second-party data. And second-party data is data that you share with suppliers, partners, or with, for instance, with retail companies called retail media in a privacy-safe way. That's an upcoming trend also because of the loss of the third-party cookies. And then there is the third-party data, and that's not only third-party cookies, that's also some bits that Georgia shared, and that could be Google search trends, weather, advertising cost. And so there are many data sources that a solid marketing technology stack needs. And when a customer has identified themselves by installing an app, registering for an email newsletter, or by a purchase, then you want to integrate all these data sources, email service provider, app, the e-commerce system, etc. All these data has different formats, different speeds, and the data needs to be transformed, meaning making useful for like data management. And also you need data lineage and metadata so that you know what type of data it is and that is being useful for you. And then you want to achieve the holy grail. The holy grail, one of the holy grails for marketers, is to achieve a 360 customer view. That doesn't really exist because that's impossible, but it's you can strive towards an as complete view on the customer as possible. And that shows interest, intent, demographics, etc. And when you have that customer view, with all these combined data sources, then you can apply modeling, and so that you apply modeling on all data and not just data that was missing in the e-commerce system or in the email system, because you can't model. You can model, but then it's not trustworthy. So you need a central customer view, and then you can apply modeling like churn prediction, engagement, customer lifetime value. And these decisions by these algorithms are being shared with your own media, the paid media or the earned media, and of course need to be orchestrated. So these are all elements in a modern marketing technology stack. And as I mentioned here in the header, there's no tool that covers this all. And if they say they do, don't believe it. It's not happening. It's a combination of technologies and processes that you need to make this work all together. Also, all these data sources and processes have to be orchestrated. Data has different speeds and formats, so you need orchestration from left to right in this image. Otherwise, you're not in control. Same goes for the data governance. Are you compliant? Where do you store the consent or the legitimate interest that you have to process the data? Because a customer can give the consent in an ESP, but does that also is being applied in the modeling? That's only possible if you centralize these bits of the data governance. Also, what happens if that data isn't loaded completely, or that there are wrong items in a table? That has to be checked, and of course also the cost need to be checked. Then you can apply business intelligence, like the reporting about what has happened, that you know what's going on. And of course, companies spend a lot of money on advertising. You want to know what is the performance of this, like George already explained. This is a different view on the same topic. on the left side, you always have data sources, and these data sources can be either be batch or streaming. And streaming data, for instance, is data of what's happening on the website or on click data. That data is being brought to an analytical data store. An analytical data store, in this case, is Google BigQuery. And if you also have real-time user stories, for instance, real-time personalization on the website, and you want to apply these models, then we keep BigQuery in sync with Cloud Firestore, because that has an extremely low latency. That is a NoSQL database. And then there's some elements of the processing that you can use for analytics, reporting, and for the activation. Again, the same view with some very known Google products. And as you see, I repeat it, below the process orchestration, the governance, the security, you need and want to be in control. You need to be in control is because of GDPR and the AI Act, etc. that's coming. You need to centralize and orchestrate it. Then, like Nico already mentioned, I like the best of breed architecture. That's one of the 3 types. Let me start with the first type that we distinguish. Of course, there may be like 9 types, but I divide it into 3. One is the situation where for instance, with Salesforce and Adobe and Oracle Cloud, where it says one third party, that these elements that are mentioned there are being done in that specific suite or combination of suites. And in that situation, of course, the company has still streaming and batch data sources being centralized, and these suites are being fed with that data without really applying analytics, because most of the analytics is being done in these suites. That's one option. Second part is the best of breed. And that's what happens here is that you, on the right side with these functions, you have you compose, you choose tools for identity resolution, campaign and delivery, for instance, and personalization and modeling. And these can either be tools from Google or from other third parties. So that's another way of implementation. And what we, at least at Crystalloids, see most, that is this. Is that of course the data ingestion and transforming and the data storage is centrally in Google Cloud, but then also the modeling, the biggest chunk of the modeling is also being done in Google Cloud, and it can be custom modeling and also out of the box modeling, for instance, with recommendations AI, and that's a product recommended. And then you use like Google Tentacles, Cloud Functions to share these decisions with the channels. At least in our practice, that's what we see most. As I said in the introduction, so the market share of the packaged, so the market is still growing at an extremely fast pace, but the market share of packaged is decreasing, and that has reasons. Many years ago, at last, a couple of years ago, to build your technology on public cloud was quite hard. It was a lot of coding, and it was always also expensive, but it has completely changed. And also, what you should keep in mind is that the package CDPs, they need a copy of the customer data in order to create a customer profile. That as the result of that is that your central point of truth is in a cloud environment, and bits of that customer view is in the CDP. Of course, that's possible, but it's not always ideal, depending on the situation. So keep that in mind. And that's what companies now have discovered. Oh, I wanted to create a central customer view. That's what they promised. But I don't really have a central customer view because I've got it living in 2 places. And that's not always what you want. Again, depending on the situation. So what we see a lot is that Google Cloud Platform is becoming the foundation for the central customer view. And there is the single point of truth. Yeah. And that's very important. And also to have all these, the metadata there, the consent of the customer, all in one central place so that you are in control. And then also, if you work with Google Cloud, you can also add campaign cost, product data, and other search trends, and other third-party data as well, which is not always possible in certain package CDPs. And you want the interoperability with the enterprise IT that my colleague Mark will be covering after me. And you can activate directly from the central point of truth, and not from a version of the truth, another version. And these clouds offer now through one console all or most of the tools that you need to build all these solutions. So it's becoming much more easier to do it, and it's all integrated. And back in 2021 September, I wrote an article about what's happening, and if you're interested, you can read into that later. And then, yes, the functionality comparison. What you see with package CDPs, by the way, package CDPs, when they started, they called themselves a platform. But most of these CDPs, they were not a platform because they weren't open. How can you call yourself a platform if you're not open? And that has changed then, also now with Adobe and with some other CDPs. They have learned from this customer feedback, and they are becoming a bit more open. But I can't really categorize them as a very open platform, as Google is, as an example. And also, with a package CDP, you don't have full control of the technology. Yeah? You have to work with the technology that this solution is offering. And that's also not necessarily an issue. But the issue could become, an issue that now you think you want this, but you don't know what you want in 2 or 3 years. And then you might discover, of course it's not sure, that you're missing functionality in how you stitch identities, how you segment clients, as an example. Or there is a development coming with a specialized tool, and this particular CDP doesn't offer that. Then you're stuck, and you have to build it in another way. That's again, doesn't have to be a problem, but really be aware of what might happen. What is a big advantage of a package CDP, though, is the plugins with TikTok, with LinkedIn, etc. Of course, Google is offering a lot of plugins and also ISVs, but it's still, depending on the type of plugin, it needs more work if you would build it on the public cloud. And then the custom reporting, with some CDPs, package CDPs offer, of course, reporting, but only the reporting what's happening in that specific CDP, but not what's happening in your total marketing technology stack. So you have this view, but you want this view. And so that's also a disadvantage, if you ask me. And then the custom machine learning models, like Google is offering all types of machine learning options, from bespoke to with SQL and out of the box. And within a package CDP, you can only work with their model. It also doesn't necessarily doesn't means that it is a problem, but once you become more sophisticated, when you have different wishes, then you're stuck. Or you have to move that data to Google Cloud, build the models there, and then feed that system with these Google fueled models. And of course, a package CDP as a pro has out-of-the-box functionality, and they have a central user interface that's mostly suitable for marketeers. And that's not always the option with Google Cloud. However, that is changing, and that's changing now with Looker. With Looker, you build like an interface that for marketeers, for people who can't code, directly on the central customer view, directly on the data warehouse. So you can do all your segmentation, your selections there, schedule it, and measure everything within Looker. So Looker really fills in now a missing gap in that in the public cloud world, and we really love that. So when should you choose for headless? in general, I say when you want more flexibility, when your business is bigger and more complex. So if you have more complex use cases, and also if you don't want to replicate data that's in the data warehouse in a package CDP, that's another reason. And because then you also have to apply all these business rules, and you have to apply tags from the CDP on your website. That is more tags, meaning more work and a slower performance of your website. Also, if you want to unlock the potential of non-customer data, Mark will cover that. And that's a very important reason. Nobody wants to be very dependent on solution providers. If you centralize it and make a headless architecture, then you reduce the vendor lock-in of certain vendors. Okay? Meaning you are more flexible in working with which types of vendors, and everybody wants freedom. Also a risk that now the cost of the CDP looks very decent, but imagine if your customer base grows 2 times, really look at the license terms that the costs don't increase by 8 to 10 times. That sometimes happens. And of course, many dedicated tools that are very integrated within a platform. And also, and that's also what was the case with Rituals. Rituals, like 8-9 years ago, was a scale up. And of course, they didn't know how the architecture after 8 years would look like. Nobody knows. What they wanted is to have the central view on all the enterprise data, so that they could easily, that the data wouldn't persist in an ESP or an e-commerce platform. Meaning that if another tool would come on the market, or if the business would want to investigate, is this a tool that we could work with, maybe, that you don't have to migrate all the data. You just plug it into the central data lake, and then you can start testing with that tool without migrating the data, meaning that in 1 or 2 sprints, you can test a new tool. And that's one of the reasons, of course, many reasons, that Rituals has grown so exponentially. They were because they had freedom and it was scalable and extremely fast. Then the final question at the end of George's presentation was, well, what if my company, if the IT director says, well, we are on AWS, we are on Azure, or on another cloud? That's what we hear a lot. And there are companies like HEMA, PVH, and other companies. They had their data lake or data warehouse on another cloud. But still, these companies choose for Google Cloud to build their marketing technology stack on. That has several reasons. One is Google has many native integrations with GMP, for instance, Google Ads and GA, and that's also where the data, where the analytics live. So Google has a very high marketing scope. Google is also an advertising company, and they really know what marketers need. It's the core business of Google. And then also the AI solutions of Google, they are very much geared toward advertising as well. If you spend a lot on advertising and you can improve the ROI by 5 to 10%, and if you spend €1 million a month, well, that's the high ROI will be high. And of course, it's low maintenance. You don't need database administrators. It's completely serverless. Everything scales automatically up and down, and you pay per use. So you don't really also need an active IT involvement. Of course, you need consent from the IT department to also work with Google Cloud. That's completely normal. But the maintenance is extremely easy. And then a multi-cloud approach, it's very helpful. And what we always say to these type of companies, we are not building another data lake. The data lake, that's centralizing, keeps there. But of course, the decisions of the CDP and Google Cloud are being ported back to the data lake or the delivery systems. Yeah, so the conclusion is there is no one size fits all. You always have to look into the world, what's happening, what do I need? Yeah, you need to be consulted, and also talk with other companies how they did it. And remember, a CDP is never a tool. And many companies, even marketing automation companies, they call themselves a CDP. Okay, CDP on email? That's not working. That's not just not true. It's a combination of functions. And find a right balance between the packaged products, the ISVs, and headless. That's my personal opinion. What I'm saying now, build as much as possible on Google Cloud. It's all integrated. It's native. It's scalable. And only buy and integrate with elements that you are missing. And when you build this data foundation and these analytics on Google Cloud, you get much more revenue out of your Salesforce marketing automation or the e-commerce system that you're using. So, and maybe you might think of my story that it's really competing with Salesforce, but in many elements, it's not. You can get much more revenue out of Salesforce if you build the foundation on Google Cloud and then share the decisions with Salesforce. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it a bit. It's not too boring.
Do we have any question, guys? We can take questions.
Yeah.
So, let's have to work for 15 minutes.
Yes.
Really interesting. I have a question about the slide where you showed the 360 view, the golden profile. It could be that a lot of people think that's the holy grail. I think, and I'm wondering what your thought about this is, because how do you get there? Do you need a data model? Do you need a data maturity model? What's your takeaway from that?
To get there, that's what Mark was covering after me. But in general, it's what I said. You have many types. You can only get there if you. That's also what Georgia said. There are many data sources, and this data all has different speeds, different formats. So that's like with Lego in a box. When you throw Lego in a box, it's data. It's nothing. It's only something if you build like a car from it or something. And that's called transformation. And if you transform the data that it's suitable for the use cases that you want to develop, then you create that bits of the customer view. Because in that data is behavior, demographics of the customer, and the intent, and the personas. If your company would like to work with personas, some companies still do that. That in total forms the view of the customer. But a true 360 customer view that you know everything about the customer, of course, that's almost not possible. Maybe for banks, because where people have to log in there, and everything that you're doing there is being traceable. But of course, that's not if you're a retailer. That's, for instance. No.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Jan. You alluded a lot on the functionalities and the technology and essentially architectural questions around going packaged or going, well, essentially build your own. Could you also elaborate a little bit on what type of capabilities you would need in your team and what the big differences are between the two scenarios in terms of those capabilities?
That's a very good question. Let's say if you're not so big of a company and you're not so technical or not technical savvy, and that's not really what you want to be, then for instance, if you would work with 1 or 2 packaged CDPs, where lots of the thinking already has been done for you, and that you can visually interact with graphical interface, that might work. When you don't need to be very technical. So that's one part of the question. And with a headless approach, or composable, you need to be more technical, or with what some of our clients do, they hire us to do the technical bits. And what happens a lot is that in the beginning we do most of the work, and then later on, client insources it, these capabilities gradually.
Who would then typically be the role or the function you would insource it to? Is that BA? Is that the data architect? Is that
That's a combination of functions. That's all. First, we start, of course, with the business case. So that's what do you want? Why do you want it? What are the best use cases, and what does it bring? Also, what does it bring in GDPR compliancy, cost reduction, risk mitigation, increased revenue? That's where it starts. It always starts with business, and then we select the use stories that are the most pressing and are bringing the most value in the short term. And then we make an estimation for that. And the estimation of work, the work on our side, Google side and client side, is being done by a team. And that's an architect, can be data architect and solution architect, an engineer, and a business analyst, sometimes also a data scientist. That's one. But to really work with a CDP, with this total solution, and then you need, then just like maybe you've heard from marketing operation, marketing ops. Yeah, so that's that you continuously build new use stories, and where technology, brand, and business is all coming together and has like a place, like a Scrum Agile way of working together. I've wrote an article, 2 articles on eMERS about this topic at 200,000 page views, because how you operate a CDP is as important as how you build a CDP. And my story now was more how to. That's just one way to look at it. But operating is it's very important as part of the data strategy.
Hello, Jan. My name is Koen. I've got a question. So throughout your story, I really feel you're an endorser for the headless approach. And so my feeling was, or question is actually like, which challenge or need would be needed that you would advise the package approach?
That if what you want to accomplish is not so complex. Your basic workflows, basic analytics, your technology stack is not so complicated. Maybe you don't have so many clients. Maybe you're not working all over the globe, but there can be many reasons to adopt a package CDP. Mm-hmm. So the headless approach is not always the best approach. I think in most cases the best approach is a combination of packaged products and what you build in the cloud. That's fit to you. Mm-hmm. It's like when you construct a house, you can have a house and everything is there and you can't change anything. Or you have a house that's for 90% finished, and the last 10 or 20% is what you compose yourself. That's what we see a lot.
And one extra about the looker, because when you had the checkboxes, I thought like, well, me as a possible future user, the user interface is the less checkbox is interesting for me. Yeah. But that had an X on the headless one. The looker, is that like already implemented fully, or you said it's coming? What's the lead time on that?
Yeah, we know Looker very well. So Looker has been acquired by Google 2.5 years ago, something. But Crystalloids was the first Looker partner in the Netherlands back in 2017, and then we didn't even know that there would be some kind of marriage between these two. But what we see with Looker, and Mark will show that in detail, is because if you have everything in place, but as a marketeer without coding knowledge, you want to be able to act on the data. And Looker is a data platform that's very handy to do that. And it sits and you have a view directly on the central point of truth. But Mark will dive into more detail about that.
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Jan. I'm fresh and new to this, for example, data architectures, and recently I've been learning a little bit about the different
architecture models. You had an old that was procedural, then you have Data Vault, then you have Kimball that is more like the star shape. And I'm wondering, for someone who wants to understand more about data architectures and modeling, is this something relevant to know to understand better how to work with Google Cloud Platform, or is it completely irrelevant, or is Google using a model? I don't know if my question is clear.
Well, not completely, but so what I advise is in general is what we do with clients. We help them, we guide them in the process of what they want to accomplish. And you have your ideas of what you want to accomplish, you and your colleagues, and we bring that together. And then together we prioritize that. But in these meetings, we also fuel these meetings with our experience and the models that we, because it's not about the nitty-gritty details about these models, it's what these models, you don't want to buy a model, you want more clients. For instance, or you want to decrease the churn probability of clients. And depending on how so we can either do that for you, or if you say, well, we are a tech company, we want to do that ourselves, then we train you how to apply these models. Maybe that's completely the answer to your question, but
more or less.